Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to today's comprehensive news analysis of the Hindu newspaper. Let's begin with the first article that is focusing on the culture of freebies that we see in India that is expanding at a very fast pace. Now, although this culture of freebies or giving out free doles to the public in India is not a very new culture, however, there has been a lot of debate about this in the past few months. More specifically, just a few days back, you saw the Prime Minister of the country on 16th of July when he was there to inaugurate the Bundelkhand Expressway. He was talking to the youth and said that the youth of the country should not fall for something that he called the Revdi culture. Now, Revdi culture, if you translate it loosely, is the freebie culture. That is, the political parties and the governments in power promising free things to the citizens if they come to power. You would have seen across the country many political parties these days are offering free electricity, some are offering free water, some are offering free of cost unemployment benefits. That is, if you don't get a job, then we'll give you this much money, free of cost bus, rail tickets. Then you have the southern India states where there was a concept of giving free of cost color television, saris, so on and so forth, just if the people vote these political parties to power. Now, what we must understand is that if some party agrees or promises that we'll pay you something free of cost, it is obvious that they are not paying it from their own pocket money. You should realize that the political party, the chief minister or the prime minister, is not paying anything from his or her salary. When they say that we'll be giving you a free of cost electricity or water or sari or television laptop, all these are actually going from government exchequer, meaning our own tax money. That means that we, as the citizens of India who have contributed to the government exchequer, have the right to decide how that money will be utilized. And that is why the freebie culture is bad for everyone in the long run. However, the point here that the author is making is how do you define what is freebie and how do you define what is welfare? Whenever any political party wants to criticize some other political party, their logic is always that if we are running a scheme, if we are giving free food grains to the farmers, if we are giving free of cost electricity to someone, if we are giving free water to the farmers, that is fine. But if the other party is doing the same in their state, that is wrong. There is no clear cut definition of what is welfare and what is freebie. In fact, if you look at India's past, some of these schemes, which can be called welfare schemes or the freebie schemes, have actually worked wonders. The author here has given an example of Manrega and the public distribution system under which very low cost food grains are given to the poor people in the society. Both of these have ensured much more money in the hands of the poor people, especially in the rural areas, allowing them to spend on other things which would not have been possible otherwise. So, yes, the freebies or the welfare schemes of the government do put pressure on the government exchequer, but we can't ignore the fact that they do strengthen the financial position of the people who are being targeted by this scheme. So, unless we have a pretty clear definition of what is welfare and what is freebie, we can't just go out and criticize one side over the other. The author here gives other examples also. For example, when the COVID 19 pandemic hit the country, the government started a large scale, free of cost food grain distribution program. Now, we can't ignore the fact that because crores and crores of people lost their jobs during this period, a lot of them were held immensely by this food grain distribution because at the end of the day, they were not worried that they were not being able to afford the food. This also can be termed as either a freebie or a welfare scheme. So there is no clear cut definition. PDS coverage, that is a public distribution system through which the government distributes very subsidized food grains across the country to the poor people or ration card holders, and the Manrega scheme. Both of these are pretty nice examples of how the government has been using this scheme. Not just this, there is another question on how would you categorize a midday meal scheme. The midday meal scheme under which the children in the government schools are given lunch, that is ready-made lunch that they can have. This has resulted in very large scale enrollment in the schools across the country. Now, what would you call this scheme? Would you call this a welfare scheme or would you call this a freebie scheme? There is no clarity on that. Also, whenever we focus on the debate of freebies, we very conveniently ignore the fact that government is actually spending money on the richer people as well. There are huge tax incentives given to the corporate sector. In fact, around 1 lakh crore rupees of revenue was lost from the government side just because tax incentives were given to the corporate taxpayers. Not just this, if you look at the budget document, the effective tax rate from the corporate sector has actually declined as the profits have increased. So when you say freebie, we can't just say that the freebies are being given to the poor section of the society. What about the freebies that the people of the corporate sector or the rich people are getting from the government? We also can't ignore that. So, if there has to be a debate on this topic, let the debate be wholesome. Let the debate incorporate topics from all the sections of the society and not just blame those welfare schemes which are targeting the poor section of the society. Now, recently, after the Prime Minister of India pointed out towards the Revoli culture, the Supreme Court also raised concerns about this. The Supreme Court also said, because a PIL was filed there, that distribution of freebies influences everyone and it shakes the roots of free and fair elections. In fact, the Supreme Court has even suggested that the Finance Commission should actually take up the matter and advise how to get rid of this freebie culture. Now, the fact remains that the freebie culture in north part of India is not very old. Yes, you see it in Delhi, UP, Punjab, and many other parts now, Rajasthan included. But if you look at south states, especially Tamil Nadu, the freebie culture in Tamil Nadu has been much older. For example, in 2006, the DMK party promised free color televisions to people if they voted to power. Then the AIADMK in 2011 announced free mixer grinders, laptops, even gold Mangal Sutras if they come to power. So almost no political party in India can proudly say that we don't believe in this culture or we don't offer free things to the people on the promise of coming to power. It is all across the country at the same culture actually is followed because more often than not it results in the election victory, and that is what matters at the end of the day for the politicians. Over here, there is also a very interesting stat. The states which have such a high debt, like Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, Uttarakhand, are the ones which have been making a lot of promises. So, obviously, it does not really make any economic sense. On the one hand, you have so much debt, you have to give back money, and on the other hand, you are actually making such promises. We are seeing what is happening in countries such as Sri Lanka, Pakistan, where they are highly subsidized essential commodities. In Pakistan, for example, which imports almost all of its crude oil, they decided to offer highly subsidized fuel to the people just to please the public. And we know what is happening in Pakistan right now. Many of these state governments in India need to realize the same lesson. Now, there are a lot of arguments in favor of the freebies as well. For example, freebies such as the one in Manrega, midday meal program, even the PDS, all these kind of schemes actually give more money in the hands of the people, ensuring that they spend more money and they can spend and change their consumption pattern. So it's more of a social investment. It also is in line with the socialistic values of the country because most of these freebies that the government are announcing are targeting the lowest section of the society. This also is in the form of welfare as we discussed. The other argument is government anyway makes a lot of wasteful expenditures that is very difficult to justify. A lot of government initiatives, even though it spends crores and crores of rupees, does not really impact the people's life in any positive way. So if that can be done, why can't we actually help the people of the country? Also, multiple reports have pointed out towards a rising inequality that India still faces. The only way to get out of it is to have targeted schemes which target the lower section of the society. Thus, the freebies have their own arguments in their favor. The next article that we have here is written by Mr. Ashish Shingal, who is the co-founder and CEO of CoinSwitch. He is talking about the cryptocurrency regulations that now are being introduced in Europe. Now, as you know, European Union is often considered as the most advanced area in the entire world. Whenever any country is thinking of making any regulations or new types of laws, they usually look towards the EU to see if they have made similar kind of a law so that they can take ideas from there. Similarly, EU again has taken a lead in making regulations about cryptocurrency. Most countries across the world do not have any proper regulations in place for cryptocurrency, the Indian government included. Although we have put a tax on the gains made through cryptocurrency, but still there is no clear cut regulation. The fact remains that while the RBI in India would like to ban cryptocurrency, the Indian government is still contemplating ways in which they can actually tax it properly and ensure that it is not misused. But the problem with cryptocurrency is that since it is not any country based currency, it is not regulated by anyone. That means that just making laws in one single country about crypto will not really make any sense. The countries across the world, at least a majority of them, have to come together and decide and take a call on the regulations of cryptocurrency. This is where European Union's decision to have something called regulation of market in crypto assets, that is MICA, actually assumes a much greater role. Now, it was just in June that the European Parliament and Council came up with this agreement called MICA. As I said, this is not the first time that European Union has been the first group or nation to come out with such regulations. They have often been the leaders of regulating most important topics around the world. In 2016, for example, the EU published the General Data Protection Regulation and was implemented in 2018. This was mostly about data privacy, about the government's control on data. It was only after this that the data privacy laws are passed in many parts of the country, and Indian government also started their discussion on data privacy on the servers of all these social media websites after this EU regulation had come into the picture. Now, let's just talk about the MICA. What does it supposed to do? What is it trying to achieve exactly? It proposes to regulate the crypto asset services and crypto asset issuers. So those who issue the crypto assets and those who provide the crypto services, they will be regulated by the governments. Europe intends to provide consumer protection, transparency, governance standards, etc. Now, just understand this. If you have a currency note with you and you just read it, the currency note very specifically says that I promise to give the bearer of this note this much rupee. So it's a promise made by the RBI to you that if you have a 500 rupee note, if no one is accepting it, you go to RBI, they will accept it and they will give you goods worth 500 rupees in exchange for that. Simple. For cryptocurrency, that is not the case. For cryptocurrency, if, for example, you buy cryptocurrency or try to buy cryptocurrency from all these apps, you pay them some money and they have not given it to you, or they say that we have already given it to you but it has not reached your wallet, then there's no regulation in between. There is no standardization in between. In case no one is accepting your cryptocurrency, you can't go anywhere because there is no consumer protection. It is all decentralized and deregulated. The European Union wants to change that specifically. Under this new regulation, the crypto asset service providers will be liable, means they will be responsible in case they lose the assets of the investors. Now, why is it so? In the past few months, we have seen in Europe and in America also, a lot of these companies that are actually working in the field of crypto have gone bankrupt. They have taken a lot more consumer money and they don't have so much cryptocurrency to issue. Now, because we did not have any older laws, there was nothing to hold these companies responsible and accountable. But now, under this, with MICA coming into being, these companies will be liable if they lose the assets of the investors. The European market laws will be applied to them. Insider trading, market manipulation, etc., will not be allowed. It also says that there will be specific regulations for stable coins. Now, what are stable coins? Stable coin is a new kind of cryptocurrency that has come up in the past few months. Now, the problem with the cryptocurrency that we used to have was there was no inherent value of any cryptocurrency. So, one Bitcoin is equal to how much no one knew. It depends on how much one is willing to pay and how much one is willing to accept. Stable coin, on the other hand, is a kind of cryptocurrency that will have a relatively stable price. It is due to its connection with a common currency like a dollar. So, for example, they can say that one stable coin is equal to $1. So, stable coins are those cryptocurrencies that are usually tied to another particular currency or a financial instrument. that gives it much more stability. Now, the stable coins have also come into picture, and they are also being regulated under the same regulation, that is MICA. Now, do understand, nothing of this sort applies to India. This is only for European Union. But the reason why we are discussing this is that it is a good way ahead. Only when the European Union does something about it, nations across the world, including India also, then start taking the lesson from it. And you may see certain kind of regulation of cryptocurrency coming into India as well. This is how these regulations can be summed up. There are regulations for crypto exchanges, regulations for securities, regulations for crypto assets and other kind of securities. This is what MICA is from the European Union. These are the different types of rules that they have. The strongest rules that they have are for e-money tokens and also cryptocurrency service providers. The issuers of crypto assets, for them the regulations are much lighter as compared to the other one. This is in short the framework that is being published by MICA. As the article also says, this is not the first time that European Union has been the first set of nations to bring out regulations. The article also talks about General Data Protection Regulation Bill. Remember, these guidelines were implemented in 2018 and that began the era of data security. That is, all that data that you have given to social media organizations, how much can they use it, what can they not use, how will it be regulated. For all of that, this was the first ever regulation that we saw throughout the world. This changed the way that organizations were required to manage their data. It held the social media companies much more accountable as compared to what they were doing earlier. There was also a big debate in Europe about something called the right to forget. Now, let me tell you what right to forget is. Let's assume that someone actually writes an article in the newspaper which says that I did not pay back my loan. Let's assume the same articles are written on Vijay Mallya, that he is guilty or he is not able to pay the loan back. Now let's assume that Vijay Mallya comes back to India, fights a case, and then the court says no, he is not guilty. All the news stories were false. Now the question is, will all the news stories disappear tomorrow? No. If you search on internet, even then you will find those articles. That person, that is Vijay Mallya, can now go to the court and say, please ask all the social media companies to delete all the articles about me because I have the right to be forgotten. This was an issue that had come up in Europe, where a person went to the court and said, I have the right to be forgotten. I don't want the social media companies or I don't want any internet companies to show any search result about me because this is a violation of my right to privacy. Such kind of a debate is a very advanced level debate that European Union first had under this particular guideline. In India, we still don't have these kind of debates because in India, we are still happy to say any kind of publicity is good publicity. And in India, you don't really see people asking for right to be forgotten. They are mostly about right to be well known. So this kind of a debate also first of all started in the EU. The next article that we have is written by Mr. Jairam Ramesh, who is a member of parliament and also the chairman of the Standing Committee on Science and Technology, Environment, Forest and Climate Change. As you know, he has been a congressman for a long time. The article that he has written is with regards to India's Antarctica initiatives. However, it is mostly about telling what the Congress did, mainly at the time of Jawaharlal Nehru and at the time of Indira Gandhi, to actually establish India's credentials as a superpower that can go ahead and explore Antarctica as well. So he first gives an account of the history of Indian expeditions to Antarctica, time and time again mentioning that it was done during the Congress rule when Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister. Then in the later half of the article, he says that the current law that the Indian Parliament has recently passed, that is also good, but the government of India currently needs to work on a much faster scale. Now he says that the Parliament of India recently passed the Indian Antarctic Bill in 2022. However, the story of India's connection to Antarctica goes back in 1956, where India became the first country to actually request the General Assembly in the UN to take up this matter of how the resources and areas of Antarctica should be used for research purposes with every country involved. At that time, India did not really have any powerful presence globally, so it was really ignored by the other nations. However, just a few years later, in 1959, 12 nations came together to sign what we call the Antarctica Treaty, in which they decided that they will use the Antarctican land for their common research purposes. In this treaty, India was not involved, India was not even invited, and this was a proof that India did not really have that much of a scientific standing in the world, at least in the eyes of the other nations. However, more than 2 decades later, in 1982, India surprised the entire world. Without anyone expecting it, in Jan 1982, India carried out its first Antarctic expedition, with the Indian team successfully reaching Antarctica. In fact, the European continent was so surprised with it that there was a headline running in Britain which said, Indians quietly invade Antarctica. At least British should not say this, because they are the masters of going to any country unannounced and then capturing it. Second expedition came in the same year in 1982 in December. So within 11 months, India had done 2 expeditions, and the entire world now could not ignore India's technological prowess. That is why the nations of Antarctica Treaty included India also in the treaty in 1983. China became a part of it later on in 1985. The starting of India's research expedition in Antarctica was with the setting up of a research base called Dakshin Gangotri in 1984. Since then, we have set up 2 other stations called Maitri and Bharti. Now, about Maitri also, there has been a lot of debate that it needs serious reconsideration. We need to refurbish it, because when it was first made, it was only made for 10 to 12 years. But it still remains as a research base. So the point is that we need to work to ensure that its infrastructure, etc., is refurbished. Now, coming back to what has happened recently and why is it in the news. As we have covered earlier also in the discussion on our YouTube channel, the Indian Parliament recently passed the India Antarctic Act. Now, what exactly is this? In simple terms, it tells that the Indian Parliament's laws will apply to Indians who are in Antarctica, the Indian research territories in Antarctica, and so on. We will talk about that law also in detail, but apart from that, the author here mentions one other interesting point. See, the normal ships can't go to places such as Antarctica or the Arctic Circle. What you need is polar research vessel that is much more technologically advanced and that is equipped with ice breaking technology, because it has huge chunks of ice in that region. So far, India does not have any of these ships. We have undertaken a total of 41 expeditions to Antarctica so far. However, the fact is that India still does not have any of its own ships. We usually take these ships on rent from nations such as Russia or Norway that have these ships. Even China has 2 of its own. It was in 2014 October that Indian government said that we will have our own research ship. However, there has not been any advancement in that. The author says that rather than thinking that we'll build this in India, because of which we are delaying this, we should actually export it from outside India without actually delaying it so much, because it's a very, very important part of our ongoing research. This will be required even because India has to take more missions in the Arctic region as well. India, as you know, has been given observer status in the Arctic Council, and we have a station in the Arctic also called Himadri. So even if we have to go and explore there, a polar research vessel is a need of the hour, which the government should not ignore, as per the author. As I told you, India's first research station, Dakshin Gangotri, is not operational now. In fact, India's Met 3 also needs urgent repair. As I said, it was made just to sustain 8 to 10 years, and it has been close to 3 decades now. And we need to ensure that there is enough refurbishment that is done on this mission if we have to sustain it for a longer time period. Now, Antarctic Treaty, as we discussed, was first signed by 12 nations only. India was made a part of this treaty much later on. Right now, this has about 54 member nations, and this is a very important infographic that you can remember. The important pointers from the treaty are that the nations have complete freedom of scientific research in the area. All the stations and equipment will be open to inspection, so no one will hide anything. The parties will meet periodically to discuss measures. There will not be any weapon or military testing that can be done in Antarctic. There shall be free exchange of scientific plans, etc. All these are the provisions of the Antarctic Treaty, of which India has also been made a part in 1983. These are the important pointers of the India Antarctic Act that was recently passed in the Indian Parliament. It says that the provisions of the bill apply to any person which is a part of Indian expedition to Antarctica that has been given the permit by the Indian government. So any crimes committed over there by Indians or any person on board the Indian vessel will be under the Indian Parliament law. The government will form a central committee on Antarctic governance and environmental protection. They will be chaired by the Secretary of Ministry of Earth Sciences. They will be the one who will be giving permit to various activities for being undertaken in Antarctic. Lot of activities have been prohibited, the same that are prohibited under the Antarctic Treaty. It also says that the government will make a fund called the Antarctic Fund. It will be applied for the welfare of the Antarctic research. The other interesting point of the bill which is being debated is the bill says it will be applicable to Indian citizens and foreign citizens as well. Let's assume in Antarctica, in one of our research stations, let's say there's a foreign citizen who has committed a crime inside that research station. Now we are saying in this bill that that person, the foreign citizen, can also be punished under the law of the Indian Parliament. However, how will you be able to do that? That is very, very challenging. Obviously, the other nation will say that he or she is our citizen, so our laws will apply. So this particular provision, that is applicability on foreign citizens, still remains unclear. The next article that we have here is on the government's decision to revive BSNL. BSNL, as you know, Bharat Sanchar Nigam Limited, is the government of India's telecom company to provide telecom services all across the country except in Mumbai and in Delhi. Because for Mumbai and Delhi, the government of India has something called MTNL, that is Mahanagar Telecom Nigam Limited. Now, the BSNL does exist. However, we all know that it is not really the preferred first or even second or third option. People across the country have shifted to Jio, Airtel, Vodafone Idea. Wherever you have an option of a private service provider, usually people prefer shifting towards it. As a result of which, BSNL has been going into huge losses. But now the government has decided to revive the fortunes of BSNL. The government announced a plan of 1.64 lakh crore. Now, that doesn't mean that this much money in cash will be given to BSNL. Out of this, the cash that will be given will be about 43,964 crore. The other money to be given to BSNL will be in the form of the 4G spectrum, so they won't have to pay for it. Other kind of capital expenditure that BSNL would have to make, government will make it on the BSNL's behalf, improving infrastructure, so on and so forth. A lot of new technology also will be given to BSNL to ensure that they can now compete with the private sector. Now, there are many reasons why BSNL has been in the stage that it is right now. Like most of the government organizations, it has many more employees and thus has to pay a lot more salaries as compared to any other private telecom sector. BSNL used to have over 1.5 lakh employees in 2019 when the government announced VRS, that is Voluntary Retirement Scheme, asking the people to retire. Many people took up that scheme, they retired and they are giving pension. Now we have about 70,000 odd employees in BSNL still. If you look at the numbers, and it is very scaring actually. BSNL showed a loss of 15,500 crore in financial year 2020. Just the cost of employees, that is salary plus pension, was 13,600 crore. Meaning that BSNL spent over 50% of the revenue on just its employees in financial year 2016. So whatever money that they were earning, half of them was going into salary and pension. In 2021, that improved slightly. In 2021, they spent 36% of their revenue to salary and pension, but even that is very high. A company like Bharti Airtel has spent only 4% of its revenue on employee expenses in both 2021-22. So it is very obvious that while Airtel and other kind of companies in the private telecom sector don't spend a lot of money in the employees category, that leaves them more money for technological advancements, for buying more equipment, giving better services to the citizens, and that is how more people opt for these companies. While BSNL is just not left with any money to spend because they are giving all that money to their employees in salary and pension. Now, the case study of BSNL is very, very interesting. If you look at BSNL's chart in the decade of 2010 to 2020, in the first half of it, they were actually a fairly profitable company. They were making profit. But the situation actually became very, very bad after 4G came up. Now, when 4G was introduced, in order to give 4G technology to the customers, they had to have new equipments. Every company, including Airtel, Idea, Vodafone, all of them had to buy new equipments. Now, what BSNL did was they raised a tender, just like any government company would do. And this is when the controversy started. Many people said that the tender that BSNL had actually introduced in the market is favoring international companies. BSNL, they said, is an Indian company, so they should buy all the products from India only. But the fact was, India never had that quality of equipment of 4G, at least at that point of time. Even Airtel bought their 4G equipment from Nokia of Finland by spending $1 billion, while BSNL was forced to buy it from India only. In the end, all these contracts were cancelled and they were just not able to buy all these 4G equipments. Similar issue was in 2008 also. Whenever BSNL tries to buy something of good quality from international companies at the best price, they are told, no, 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 buy it from India, you are a government company. Now, for them, if they have to serve to the customers, they have to buy the best form of equipment at the best rate possible. That was not made possible because BSNL was under a lot of pressure. Also, they were not able to attract a lot of talent. Whenever BSNL went to any international company to team up with them or to take any technology with them, again the same kind of criticism was made. That why is it that the government company of telecom is actually going outside India? At the same time, Airtel, Vodafone, Idea, all these are able to make international collaborations, and BSNL was left behind. Now, there is a very interesting thing that you have to understand about BSNL and telecom. One of the reasons that government runs telecom companies such as BSNL is not exactly to make profit. See, if you have traveled across India, you would know that if you go to very, very remote location, let's say you go to Ladakh and you go to higher areas, mostly you will only get BSNL, that is the only option. When you go to Andaman Nicobar Islands, for example, the only two options that you get are BSNL and Airtel. So I know from personal example, at least till 2 years ago, we did not have any Jio, we did not have any Vodafone, etc. in Port Blair or in the Havelock Islands in Andaman Nicobar. So there in those areas where other telecom companies are not setting up their systems because it is not profitable for them, the government has to connect people, and this is where BSNL comes into the picture. So many people have suggested that BSNL should not run after profit. It's more of an essential commodity that the government has to provide to the people. That is why if you look at rural areas in India, for example, most of the people still only have BSNL because the private companies, they don't find it more profitable to set up their towers and systems in rural areas because the people won't pay a lot of money and the population also is lower. So many people suggest that the purpose of running BSNL should not be to earn profitability. It should be to help people in disaster relief. That is, when there is any natural disaster, telecom lines, etc. are destroyed, then the BSNL network should be very, very powerful. They should be working as an obligation to the citizens to help them and not really to earn profit from them. BSNL recently has been merged with the Bharat Broadband Network, where this network is now being used to connect the villages across the country, which is also something that we have to understand. There are three very, very important reasons that highlight the significance of BSNL for India. First, as I said, if you look at rural areas where there is not much profit for private sector, BSNL still is the top choice. More than one third of BSNL's optical fiber customers are in the rural areas because this is where low income consumers are located. Secondly, BSNL is still mainly dependent on domestic component manufacturers, which is making it difficult for them to compete with the private sector. BSNL launching 4G services and 5G services will also take the domestic component factories with them. Now is a time that the Indian factories can actually compete with international ones and produce much better telecom equipment. So their progress can also go ahead with BSNL. Lastly, BSNL, as I said, is the main network of the government that is offering services in rural areas, border areas, even left wing extremist areas, where the private companies don't have any interest because they can't earn a lot of profit there. That is why it is important for the government to revive and to keep BSNL running for the benefit of the country. This is also something that you have to understand. BSNL has been making a lot of losses year after year. It is one of the biggest loss making companies of the Indian government. As you can see, losses of close to 7,500 crore rupees in financial year 2021. MTNL also is not very far away, although it works only in Delhi and Mumbai, but you will hardly see anyone taking services of MTNL in Delhi or in Mumbai. One more thing, this is not the first attempt by the government of India to revive BSNL. Couple of years back, they did take certain steps to revive BSNL by actually ensuring that we can merge the assets of BSNL and MTNL. The government issued sovereign bonds worth 15,000 crore rupees to revive the fortunes of BSNL and MTNL. They also decided to allocate 4G spectrum and gave attractive VRS packages to reduce the employee load of these companies. They did work for some time, but in the end, it was realized that we need much more drastic measures. The next article that we have here is about the Supreme Court's recent judicial interpretation of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act (PMLA). In simple terms, the Supreme Court upheld the powers of Enforcement Directorate and also upheld the fact that yes, it should be very difficult to get bail under PMLA. The Supreme Court said that yes, under PMLA, getting bail should only be possible if two conditions are met. Now, what are those two conditions? First condition, that a person to be released on bail, public prosecutor, that is a lawyer of the government, must have the opportunity to oppose the bail. Number one. Second, bail will only be given if the court is satisfied that the person will not commit any other offense when he is out on bail. In simple terms, if the court has a feeling that a person will not do any offense when he is out on bail, only then the bail will be given. Now, this goes against the entire idea of innocent till proven guilty, because without you investigating anything, you're just going on the feeling. If the judge feels that the person will not break the law, then only then he or she will be released on bail. Now, this is a very complicated matter because the Supreme Court earlier had said that no bail should not be denied. So let's see how exactly has the Supreme Court changed its position. Now, in order to understand this, do remember there is one more law that was in existence earlier but has been removed now, called TADA, Terrorist and Disruptive Activities Act of 1987. This was a similar kind of a law which had said that getting a bail should be very difficult and the bail should only be allowed in these two conditions, the one that we mentioned. Now, there are two Supreme Court cases that you need to remember. The first case that we are talking about came in 2018. In this case, called the Nikesh Shah case, the Supreme Court said that the current law that we have, that is the PMLA Act, should not deny bail. Bail should not be denied. Why? Because the law that we have, the PMLA law, is not the same as TADA. TADA was a very strict law. Under that, if you are denying bail, that is fine. But PMLA law, money laundering is not terrorism. So we are saying that bail should not be denied. That is what the court said in 2018. Now, after this case, what happened was the parliament actually made some changes in the PMLA law and they wrote exactly the same language that was written in the TADA law. The same language that was written in TADA law, that it is a terrorist activity, the same was now written in the PMLA Act, that money laundering is a terrorist activity. So now Supreme Court has said that because the language of the PMLA law has changed, now it is equal to TADA, and now just like TADA, bail will not be allowed easily. Bail won't be allowed easily. This is what the Supreme Court has now said. This is the current case called the Vijay Madan Lal case of 2022. The Supreme Court has said that we are of the view that money laundering is a heinous crime, and just like Tada, here also bail should not be given. The problem here is that the Supreme Court continuously has said that bail is the rule while jail is exception. Usually bail should be given, jail should only be exception. But now the Supreme Court is going against its own directive. Also, as I said, it is now leaving it on the judges to decide what do they feel about the person. If they feel the person will commit a crime in the future, if left out on bail, then the bail will not be given. This goes against the concept of innocent till proven guilty. In the same case, the Supreme Court enhanced or at least upheld the powers of ED, that is Enforcement Directorate, an agency that works under the provisions of PMLA, that is Prevention of Money Laundering Act. The Supreme Court said that money laundering is as heinous an offense as terrorism, and that is why we cannot reduce the powers of ED, they should have a lot of powers. The Supreme Court said that granting a bail under this act should be difficult. It is not even mandatory for the ED to give enforcement case information report. It is not as similar to the FIR. While FIR is necessary for ED, it is not even necessary for them to give them a report. So in this judgment, in short, the PMLA has been made very strong and the powers of ED has also been increased by the Supreme Court. These are the articles we want to discuss in the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. Number one, critically analyze the government's decision to revive loss-making public enterprises such as the BSNL. Second, lack of long-term policy on cryptocurrency in India may force the government to play the catching up game in the coming years. Do you agree? Elaborate. Both the questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.